Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Brett Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to brettridgway.com/freebie. Welcome to the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway, where you'll learn the keys to building a profitable speaking business from speaking industry pros. Each week, we interview a great guest who will share his or her speaking journey, identify what their keys to success have been, and highlight some critical mistakes they've made along the way that you'll want to avoid. Be sure to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, sit back, tune in, and get ready to meet this week's guest.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway. I'm your host, and I'm excited to have as my guest today, Rich Hopkins. Now, Rich has been speaking and coaching speakers for over 20 years. When he's not in front of audiences showing them how to hit or how to live their WinAnyway life, he's working with entrepreneurs and aspiring keynote speakers to help them discover, develop, and deliver their best messages. In his spare time, he's been married nearly 25 years consecutively, has 6 kids and 3 cats. Welcome, Rich, to the Spotlight on Speaking show.
Thank you very much, Brett. It's an honor to be here.
Now, I got to say, you got me doubled on the number of kids. I only got 3, but I got you beat on the cats by 1. And my wife and I have been married 40 years this year, so I got you a few years on that one. But
is that consecutively?
Oh, yes. All right, Rich. So, you and I haven't had a chance to really speak before, so we're just going to dive right into it. And so you've been coaching speakers and doing speaking for over 20 years. So what prompted you to get into this game in the first place?
I never really wanted to get into public speaking because in junior high, I had this experience where I had to give an oral book report. Remember those?
Oh,
Get
yeah.
in front of the room and I didn't think I needed to prepare because it was a book report on Abraham Lincoln. So I really didn't even read the book. I just figured, 16th president, freed the slaves, grew up in a log cabin. It'd be really easy. But when I got up there, I froze, couldn't say anything. And I pretty much decided at that moment, I was not going to be speaking in public again if I could at all help it. But I ended up kind of getting into public speaking in college because there was this girl. There's always a girl, right? And she was trying out for the school play, the Christmas play, wanted me to try out with her. So I tried out with her, and I got the lead. She didn't get cast at all. Well, that was the shortest relationship ever. But that kind of created the longest relationship I've had since then, and that's with performing, speaking in public. Yeah, acting isn't quite the same, but it was the beginning. And that led to a career in sales, where you're still speaking, still using other people's lines. This is what you're supposed to say when they say this, back and forth. It's all training. And then came Toastmasters because of a girl. Well, in this case, it was a woman. She invited me to her Toastmasters club, and I've pretty much been in Toastmasters ever since, learning how to be a better speaker, getting an opportunity to work with other people to help them become better speakers. And all of that just added up to me suddenly realizing I'm good at this. I don't need to do it in a structured environment like Toastmasters or some community play. I can do it for real. I can speak in front of real live audiences. I can coach real live speakers so they can discover, develop, and deliver their best message. And I've been flying ever since.
So I like to say there are three primary types of speakers, Rich. You have your keynote presenters, you have your platform selling speakers, and then you have just, we'll call them business builder speakers. They just speak on for their company to build awareness, and then hopefully people will come to them for whatever service they offer. So do you work specifically just in the keynote area, or have you done any of the others at all?
Uh, for me as a speaker, I primarily focus on keynote speaking, going out and trying to be an inspirational, motivational, entertaining type speaker. But when it comes to coaching, kind of runs the gamut. You have those people that want to be a keynote speaker. Then I have people call me up and say, hey, my boss said I have to go speak at this conference in 2 weeks. He gave me a slide deck. What do I do? So, working with everyone from that potential keynote to that last second speaker to the people who own their own businesses that want to use public speaking to basically be a marketing tool, I've worked with all those types of speakers. But for me, I primarily go out as a motivational speaker.
All right. So how much customization do you do for a given talk? How much homework, research ahead of time to slant it to your audience and make it sure that it's hitting their pain points as best as possible?
I do a lot of homework. It doesn't always result in a lot of customization. You've got to know who you're speaking to be able to speak to that audience, to their specific problems, to understand what their mindset is when you're going in. But for the most part, as a speaker, you're going to use the same stories. You're going to use the same process that you've used in past speeches because that's what they're buying. It's just a question of, is there a story you need to trade out because it doesn't fit for that audience? Is there another story you have in your cachet of stories that's going to fit better for that audience? Or do you need to go out and do some special customization because that audience is so unique and their problem is so different from perhaps other audiences you've been in front of? But typically, motivational speakers give the same speech almost identically from place to place to place with a minimum of customization, just enough to make them realize you did care enough to find out who they are and talk to them directly.
So as a keynote presenter, has your topic always been the same thing or has it evolved over the years? And what is your go-to topic these days in terms of keynote speaking?
My go-to talk is winning anyway. Winning anyway in a world that demands you're either winning or losing. I believe that you can win no matter what. You lose, you still win. It's not a new concept. It's kind of a new way to say the old concept of sometimes you lose, sometimes you learn, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, those types of concepts. But it's a way to keep your self-esteem up, your motivation up. That's really the crux of what I talk to people about so that they don't get lost in feeling like they're not winning or that they're a loser because the world won't recognize even small victories they have if they haven't achieved the big victories that they've either personally set for themselves or that the world has set as an expectation for them.
As a keynote presenter, do you primarily speak to corporations or associations or some other group?
I want to get out and speak to corporations. I'm mostly speaking to associations and service groups right now.
Okay.
But, those 6 kids have kind of held me back a little bit because I wanted to stay home and be around for them.
Sure.
But now that I've reached an advanced age and I have this level of experience, but I also have a level of freedom, I am branching out to approach corporations and different conferences to speak for them.
So what's worked best for you, Rich, in terms of landing speaking gigs?
That's just sales. You could be the best speaker in the world and nobody will ever hear you if you don't know how to market yourself. And there are a lot of different directions you could take. You can apply to a lot of conferences. You can send emails just blind to people like you're in typical sales for anything else. But what I found is knowing the right people, meeting the right people. You're at the right networking opportunity and letting people know who you are. You're on a podcast and people find you that way because they actually heard you and are interested in you. They say that if the answer is networking and referrals, then you're not really getting as much business as you say you are. But let's face it, sales is not as easy as it used to be. And if you can have a warm lead, if you can have the right person say the right thing for you at the right time, that's going to be the easiest sale you're ever going to make.
So let's go back to the speaking specifically. And what is your best advice, Rich, to an up and coming speaker as to how to best establish rapport quickly with their audience?
My speeches always start a story that is either related to the audience in some way, but is always related to my overall message and is short and humorous. Because the quicker you can get your audience laughing, the quicker they're going to be in tune with you. You have to get them to know, like, and trust you. Well, they get to know you from the introduction. And if you can get people to laugh in the introduction, all the better. Give your introducer that laugh. And then you've got that opportunity in the first 30 to 60 seconds to tell that story that preps the audience for what they're about to hear and also gives them a chance to laugh and like you.
So after a speech is done, how do you measure whether that speech has been successful or not?
Typically, there's what did the meeting planner want? Is there a measurable for them in terms of performance from the audience afterwards? That's probably the toughest thing to actually get, is some sort of measurement in terms of performance. But then the old go-to is, does that meeting planner recommend you? Do they give you a testimonial? Do they hire you again? And then there's everything in between. Do you get testimonials from the people in the audience? Are they happy with you? Do they come up and talk to you afterwards? Are they buying things in the back of the room if you happen to be in a situation where you're able to sell after you speak? Do they sign up for maybe your offer or your course or your newsletter if you have one? And believe me, having a newsletter is not still 1990s or early 2000s. You still want to capture names. You still want to build that email list, because you never know when somebody in that audience is going to be the next person who hires you. And if they don't have a way to connect with you, you may lose them forever.
Sure. So when you're just starting out as a new speaker and you need to develop that initial keynote presentation, what length of speech do you feel that a speaker should shoot for? Because obviously it needs to be modular in nature in some sense, so that you can add or subtract based on the amount of time that you have to speak. But what's your sweet spot in terms of the length of your core presentation?
When I help my clients create their keynote, we aim for 45 minutes.
Okay.
Because it's really easy to shorten to 30 or 25 for a service group, and still pretty easy to expand to a full hour if you're able to get a full hour any place these days.
Now, best advice, Rich, for an upcoming speaker as to, let's say, 3 tips for success to be a successful keynote speaker.
Use humor. Absolutely use humor, because people, if they're not laughing, then they are bored and they are doing something else. You can create humor pretty easily in any story that you tell and in any keynote you're giving, even if it's a pretty serious subject. So use humor, number one. Number two, make sure you're giving them something they can actually put into action. And that's in 2 parts, because you have to show the meeting planner that you are giving them something in your speech that can be actionable, because the meeting planner has to be able to tell that to the people that are authorizing the money. But then you also have to give that audience something to do to go home with. But then third, you need to not necessarily be that all information speaker. You've got to have fun up there. You've got to be entertaining. You've got to get your audience involved. Because meeting planners will tell you, oh, we want this information. We want these action items. But if you only give dry information and dry action items just to fulfill that promise, well, the audience is unhappy. And then ultimately, even though you've done exactly what you told the meeting planner you'd do, they're unhappy because their audience is unhappy, which makes the people with the money unhappy. So you have to be both. You have to be everything these days. It's just a matter of what you lead with the meeting planner to get the opportunity, and then what you lead with the audience to make them feel happy and satisfied at the end of your presentation.
All right. So are you a proponent of or anti slide decks?
Wow, that's a tough question. So many people use slide decks. I don't tend to use slide decks, but it depends on what you're talking about. You know, if you've got a very specific process, if it's a technical situation, if you're doing something that people need to remember in different ways than just being inspired, use a slide deck. Don't overuse a slide deck. Your slide deck isn't your notes. It's not a crutch. It's something to augment what you're saying. And I work with speakers all the time on making sure that their slide decks are not overloaded or just completely texturized where you're reading and reading and reading, or, you know, the bullets are deadly. I tell people that all the time. You get all these bullets on your slides, you're killing your audience. So slides are okay when they're used well, but if you can get away without slides, I think that's really the better way to go these days.
All right, so got a couple other questions I want to ask you, Rich, but before we do, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Brett Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to brettridgway.com/freebie.
And we are back with the Spotlight on Speaking show and my guest, Rich Hopkins. So, Rich, we're talking about slide decks or whatever. So, other than bullets being the death of a slide or whatever, what are some other don'ts to do in terms of slide decks?
Well, using too much animation, they got really popular. PowerPoint brought out the opportunity to have things slide in and go like this. Don't overdo the animation. Maybe don't even do the animation at all. You might have 3 points that slowly dissolve in, but I wouldn't do anything more than that. You know, obviously don't use more than one font. If you have 2 fonts, that might work if they're consistently used. But if you use a lot of different fonts, you're just confusing your audience. And for people who don't know what font means, it means typeface, the style of type that you're using on your slides. Best practices tend to be using your slides as pictures most of the time, with 8 to 12 words to describe what's on the screen if you need it. If you don't need any words, all the better. Slides can be used as punchlines, and use the B button. Turn off your slides when you don't need them. They don't need to be in your background if you're not talking about what's on the slide at that moment. Don't be afraid to have nothing on the screen.
All right, so now it's the barrier soul portion of the program, Rich, and that's come up with an embarrassing story where maybe some mistake you made along the way in your speaking career that left you red-faced at the time, but a valuable lesson was learned, and it would be something that you would highly advise aspiring speakers not to do.
Wow, I don't know. I don't think I've ever had an embarrassing moment. There was a moment where
It
I
could
was
be something. It
practicing.
could be something you saw somebody else do. It's like, what the
No,
hell were
no,
they
no.
thinking?
I've got an embarrassing moment.
All right.
I definitely do. In Toastmasters, there's something called the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I've qualified for it twice at the finals level, at the top level. And before you do that, you have a couple of months typically to practice the speech. And you go to a lot of different Toastmasters clubs typically to practice that speech. And I got up in front of one club and just completely flubbed it, lost my place, couldn't keep going. And it was kind of a rerun of the book report when I was in junior high. And I said, you know what? I just can't do this. I'm not ready for this. And I left the meeting right in the middle of the speech. And I realized that even though, I had become a fairly well-known speaker in Toastmasters, even though I had gone to the World Championship 2 years prior to that moment, I was not so good at what I was doing that I didn't need to prepare, that I didn't need to really keep working hard for every moment and every audience, even if it was just a practice audience. Everybody deserved my best, and I didn't give my best that night.
So, as a motivational speaker, obviously you're in a world where there are thousands of motivational speakers. So, how do you differentiate yourself from all the others out there?
Well, for me, Winning Anyway is the brand, and that's fairly different. I don't know anybody else who really uses Win Anyway as their brand. One of these days, I'm going to have to go out there and trademark it or something like that. But for me, I just differentiate myself by being me. That's the only thing you can really do, because all the information you're giving is pretty much the same. We've been using the same inspiration, the same ideas to feel better about yourself, to persevere, to be creative, to review your life. All these things, we've been saying them since the beginning of time. The question is, can you tell stories from your own life that nobody else can tell? Can you tell them in a way that nobody else can tell? I'm me. Nobody else is Rich Hopkins. I have unique situations that have happened in my life, whether it's a disability that you can't see on a podcast. I walk funny. Nobody can tell I walk funny. I'm sitting down. You don't see me walking, and you don't want to because I'm wearing shorts because we're on Zoom. So there you go. I've got an amputated leg, which, that's fairly unique. Although in the speaking industry these days, half the speakers have no legs and no arms. I've often joked that I'm not disabled enough to be a motivational speaker. One of these days, I'm just going to have to go for another arm. Those are stories that I have that even if other people have similar stories, they don't have my story. They don't have my 6 kids. They don't have my daughter who went through chemotherapy for a brain tumor. They don't have my wife and half of our kids who have neurofibromatosis, a genetic disorder that is the least known but most common throughout the world. I have stories nobody else can tell, and a combination of stories that really nobody else can tell.
That's such a great point. So, Rich, I want to give you a couple minutes now to tell people a little bit more about what it is that you do for speakers and how they can get involved in your world if they so choose.
Again, I work with speakers that really want to find out who they are, whether they're wanting to deliver a keynote speech or use speaking to advertise their business in some way, to market themselves. The best work that I do with people in that situation is really digging down into who they are, what they've done in their life, and what problems they've learned to solve. There's everybody has this message they think they want to tell, but just because you have a message you want to tell doesn't mean that's the message your audience needs to hear. Doesn't mean you can't tell your story, but you have to find a way to make your story matter to the audience. If you have a business, Well, what differentiates your business? What problem does that business solve for your audience? You can't just tell how great you are as a business person, how wonderful your customer service is, how long you've been in business. We don't care. We want to know how quickly you'll solve my problem. You know, how are you better than the guy next door? So whether you're trying to deliver a keynote or you're trying to sell your business, you have to speak to the audience and what their needs are. And that's a lot of the work that we do in creating that speech, because it's really easy for someone to just say, oh, I just want to talk about this, and I know everybody needs to hear this. No, they don't, unless we tell them in the right way.
And where are they going to go online, Rich, to find out more details?
Well, they can find me pretty much anywhere on social media. I grab my name early on every platform, from Twitter to Facebook to, MySpace, but I don't think anybody uses MySpace anymore. You can also reach me at richhopkins.com, and you can email me at rich@richhopkins.com.
All right, outstanding. So any final words of wisdom for the aspiring speaker, Rich, as we wind down to the end of this episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show?
Well, whether you want to be a speaker or whether you are a speaker, keep in mind that what you want to do is personal to you. Your victories are your own. Your goals are your own. Don't let the world tell you whether you're winning or losing. You get to make the choice to see where you're at, see what you've done, and celebrate how far you've gone so that you can keep moving, keep going forward. And that's how you live your win anyway life.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for being my guest on this episode of the show. As always, I wish you the greatest of success in all that you do. And to the listeners out there, thank you for joining us today. And may this year be your greatest year yet. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
This has been the Spotlight on Speaking show with Brett Ridgway. Be sure to join us every week as we interview speaking industry pros and have them share their best tips for building a profitable speaking business. Until next week, thank you for tuning in, and remember to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com so you can enjoy even more great episodes like this one. While you're here, be sure to subscribe via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Spotlight on Speaking show. Until then, our sincere best wishes to you for the greatest of success as you work to build your own profitable speaking business.